the house on Staten Island. The fog was the first to greet them on the driveway to Hartwick Manor. Not a gentle veil, but a dense, milky-white shroud that wrapped the old Victorian mansion like a burial cloth for the forgotten. It obscured the façade with its lancet windows, sharp as needles punched into stone, and the massive oak door, its black iron fittings corroded by a century of rust. The house stood alone, abandoned on the outskirts of Staten Island, radiating an icy silence so heavy that Eleanor Vance's heart clenched at the threshold. She stepped out of the car, her mourning dress instantly drinking in the damp air. Too heavy for early autumn, it clung to her like the grief she carried instead of a shawl. "Nicholas, Anna, don't linger." Her voice cut through the fog like a blade. "And don't look around. Straight into the house." The children obeyed, climbing out with hesitant steps, clutching their coats tight. Nicholas, pale beyond his 8 years, squinted at the grey sky before quickly lowering his gaze. Anna, 11, studied the house in silence, curiosity and fear warring in her wide, all-seeing eyes. They lingered on the boarded shutters of the second floor. "It's very big, Mum," she whispered. "That's what we need," Eleanor answered, forcing a heavy key into the stubborn lock. "Seclusion, peace. No one will disturb us here." The door groaned open, and a wave of gloom spilled out to meet them. The air smelled of dust, mossy stone, and something else, sweet, cloying, like flowers long withered. Inside, shadows ruled. Weak autumn light strained through the stained glass window above the door, staining the marble floor with streaks of blood red and sickly blue. "The rules remain the same," Eleanor said firmly, sliding each bolt into place. The final click reverberated too loudly in the silence. "No lights, no open windows, curtains always drawn. You know what will happen if we touch the light," Nicholas finished, his voice flat, his eyes on the colored patterns, shifting at his feet. "Our skin will burn." "Exactly. For your own good." Her heels struck dully against the parquet as she led them deeper inside. The rooms opened one by one like funereal tableaux, a living room, its shrouded furniture resembling rows of patient ghosts. A dining room with a cavernous empty table where shadows huddled thickest. A library where books pressed against each other in weary, cracked leather bindings, as if trying to whisper secrets from the shelves. Their footsteps echoed, and with them came another sound. Subtle, out of step, as though something followed half a beat behind, pausing just out of sight. Anna froze. "Do you hear that, Mom?" "Only the floorboards," Eleanor snapped, but she too had stilled. Somewhere, distant yet distinct, came a faint metallic groan. Creak, creak, creak. The sound of a rusted swing swaying in the dark. "It's the wind," she said quickly, but outside, there was no wind. They climbed to the nursery. The vast, cold room swallowed them whole. Eleanor lit a single kerosene lamp, its fragile glow painting the walls with monstrous shadows that swayed and shivered like things alive. "I don't want to stay here," Nicholas whispered, pressing himself against her side. "It smells like strangers. This is your home now." She straightened his collar with fingers icy to the touch. "And we are safe. No one will find us. Here, no one." But when she doused the lamp and pulled the door shut, it wasn't only darkness that descended. It was something heavier, something alive, breathing. Moments later, in the oppressive silence, Anna heard it. A whisper at her bedside. "We were frightened at first, too." She lay frozen, every muscle locked. "But you get used to the dark." At dawn, Eleanor brought in help. Mrs. Abigail appeared as though conjured from the mist, tall and gaunt, dressed in unyielding black, her silver hair wound into a flawless knot. Her face was pale, her expression unreadable, her eyes far too knowing for the dimness of the hall. "You will tend to the house," Eleanor told her, "and the children. Make sure they follow the rules." Mrs. Abigail inclined her head, her gaze gliding over the walls as though she had always known them. "This house demands particular care, Mrs. Vance," she said softly. "It does not like fuss, and it does not like to be disturbed." "Disturbed? By whom except us?" The housekeeper smiled. Thin, bloodless lips pressed tight and glided deeper into the corridor. Her skirt whispered nothing at all. Later the gardener appeared, Mr. Thornton, a surly man with a weather-beaten face and hands scarred by the thorns of long-dead roses. Without meeting Eleanor's eyes, he muttered something about the soil, here being temperamental, and that the old-timers don't like it when their roots are disturbed. "What old-timers?" Eleanor frowned. "The trees, ma'am." He finally looked up, and for an instant something wild, almost animal, flared in his eyes. The trees, of course. From then on, the strangeness only deepened, gathering like an avalanche. One night, Anna woke to see the silhouette of a girl in an old-fashioned white dress crouched by the fireplace in her room. The girl was crying, her face buried in her knees. When Anna whispered to her, the figure dissolved into shadow, leaving behind only a breath of ice. "She was real, Mom," Anna insisted at breakfast, her hands trembling. "She was crying." "You dreamed it," Eleanor said firmly, setting her teacup down too hard. The sharp clatter made Anna flinch. "The mind plays cruel tricks in the dark. We will not indulge in foolishness." "But I'm not making it up. Nicholas heard it too. He heard someone calling his name from the attic." Nicholas, pale and silent, only pushed his oatmeal around the bowl, unwilling or unable to speak. Eleanor felt the ground shift beneath her. Her carefully woven plan to hide from the world, from grief, from memory, was unraveling. The house, instead of being a refuge, was becoming a prison shared with unseen cellmates. One evening, while checking the locks, her gaze fell on a large mirror framed in tarnished gold. And for a fraction of a second, she saw in it not her own reflection, but another woman, gaunt, hollow-eyed, her face twisted in horror, standing right behind her. Eleanor spun around. No one, only silence. But then she heard it, a slow, wet sound in the dark. Drip, 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 as if water were falling from the ceiling onto stone. Grabbing a candelabrum, her heart pounding, she followed the sound through a maze of corridors until it led her to the cupboard under the stairs. The door stood slightly ajar, and a breath of cold seeped through the crack. She flung it open. On the bare stone floor lay a dark puddle of water, black as ink. And on the wall, at her eye level, someone had scrawled a word with a wet finger. "Go away." Eleanor staggered back, and at that very moment a door slammed upstairs. A child's scream tore through the house, raw and piercing. Eleanor rushed to the nursery. Anna sat trembling on the bed, her finger pointing at the wall across from her. She's here again. She said we're in her room, that we stole her house." On the wallpaper, where moments before there had been only darkness, a wet stain spread and bled into shape. Slowly, it formed the outline of a little girl. Then the plaster cracked, lines crawling across the wall as though etched by an invisible hand, spelling out words. "My room, my house, you stole it." Eleanor stood, Frozen, numb with terror, this was no illusion, no trick of the light. It was real, hostile, alive, breathing hatred. She stumbled out into the hall and nearly collided with Mrs. Abigail. The housekeeper stood calmly, a candle burning steady in her hand. "What is this?" Eleanor gasped, seizing her arm. "What's happening in this house?" Mrs. Abigail looked at her with ancient sorrow in her eyes. "The house is old, Mrs. Vance. It has many layers, many stories. Some are more insistent than others. They do not like to be forgotten." "Who are they?" "Ghosts." "We are all ghosts here," the housekeeper said softly. "It's just that some of us don't know it yet." That night, Eleanor did not sleep. She sat in the study, clutching an old Bible, listening to every sound. The house was alive. It breathed. It groaned. It whispered. She heard footsteps above when no one was awake. She heard low muttering in the library, as if someone were reading aloud to an unseen audience, and always from the yard, that rhythmic creak of swings moving in the dark. By morning her despair had hardened into resolve. She climbed to the attic. She needed answers, at any cost. The attic was suffocating with the relics of forgotten lives. Cobweb-draped trunks, broken chairs, portraits of strangers whose pale faces stared with hollow eyes. And in the farthest corner stood an oak chest, untouched by dust, as though it had been opened only yesterday. Eleanor's pulse quickened. She lifted the heavy lid. Inside lay yellowed photographs, brittle letters, faded newspaper clippings. She took up the first picture, a group portrait before the mansion, smiling faces in clothes from the last century. And then she recognized them, herself, her own face, stern yet serene. The children, Nicholas and Anna, clutching dolls in their small hands. And in the background, unmistakable even in youth, Mrs. Abigail, her piercing eyes unaltered. Mr. Thornton, grim as ever, on the back, written in ink bleached by time, the Hartwick family, 1895. A strangled cry escaped Eleanor's lips. The photograph slipped from her trembling hands, scattering across the dusty boards. She saw herself again, smiling beside her husband on the porch, the children laughing as they played with the very same ball now lying forgotten in the attic's corner. Feverishly, she sifted through the pictures, and with each image the icy truth drove deeper, like a blade twisting inside her. They had not moved here recently. They had always been here. They had died here. Fragments of memory, long suppressed, burst forth, tearing apart the fragile web of denial she had spun. Winter. She leaves for medicine, the children feverish in bed. She returns to silence, a silence so heavy it smothered. Breath itself. The children, still already cold, a faulty furnace, carbon monoxide. Her own scream shredding her throat. Then, the revolver in the desk drawer. A flash. A bang. And then, nothing. Only silence. Eternal, impenetrable darkness. She was not a widow who had survived the war. She was a woman who had not survived. Her loss, a suicide, and her children, her poor children. Mum? She turned. Anna and Nicholas stood on the attic stairs. Their faces were pale, sorrowful, but in their eyes there was no fear, no surprise, only quiet acceptance. "We knew," Anna whispered. "We were just waiting for you to remember." We are dead," Eleanor breathed. The words brought, not pain, but a strange, bitter relief. "But we are not alone," Nicholas added, pointing to the photographs strewn across the floor. There are others here, many others. They have always been here. At that moment, the front door downstairs slammed shut. Voices rang out, loud, human, alive, filled with irritation and confusion. "What the hell? Is someone here?" A man's voice called. Eleanor, clutching her children's hands, descended slowly into the hall. 3 figures stood there, a man, a woman, and a little girl. The new owners, the Carters. They froze, staring at the ghostly family with a mixture of horror and disbelief. "Who are you? What are you doing in our house?" Mrs. Carter cried, pulling her daughter to her chest. Eleanor took a step forward, her figure flickering in the dim light. We are the Hartwick family," she said, her voice rustling like dry autumn leaves. "And this is our house. We never left." A silence, heavy and dead, fell. Little Lily peeked out from behind her mother's skirt. "Why are you so pale?" she asked. "Because we are stuck," Anna answered softly. "We have forgotten how to leave." Mr. Carter turned ashen, clutching the doorframe. "Ghosts! You're ghosts!" What followed could be called a war, if one side had the slightest idea of the rules. For the Carters, it was a struggle against an incomprehensible affliction. For the Hartwicks, it was a blind, instinctive defense of the only reality they still possessed. It began subtly. Mr. Carter, a practical man with no patience for superstition, armed himself with everything the city could offer, from church candles to insect repellents that promised to ward off larger, unclean entities. He marched from room to room with incense until the acrid smoke made the corners writhe and hiss in quiet displeasure. The house responded, nights filled with phantom crashes as though barrels rolled endlessly across the empty attic. Mrs. Carter, more sensitive, brought in a local priest. Father Michael, pale and sweating, sprinkled holy water in every corner. The drops hissed and vanished on contact as if falling onto hot iron. When he tried to pray in the living room, his voice cracked, slipped into a shrill falsetto, then vanished altogether, his lips moving in silence. He fled without farewell and never returned. Driven by despair, the Carters turned to brute force. Workers were hired to strip the walls and tear up the floors. But with the first hammer blow, a shriek tore through the house, so raw, so filled with anguish that the men bolted outside and swore never to step back in, no matter the price. The next day, Mr. Carter found all his tools firmly embedded in the newly hardened concrete of the terrace. And all the while, the house was changing. Shadows thickened, swallowing the beams of flashlights whole. The air turned heavy, syrupy, sickly sweet with rot. Each morning, frost spread across mirrors and windows, sketching grotesque faces with hollow eyes and gaping mouths. The Hartwicks meant no harm. Their presence was not malice, but instinct, a defense of their nest. Eleanor would appear to Mr. Carter in his study, not as a raging phantom, but as a pale, silent figure watching from the depths of the room, her gaze enough to freeze his blood. Anna and Nicholas, purer and more childlike, expressed themselves differently. Laughter ringing inches from Mrs. Carter's ear, Lily's toys vanishing and reappearing in impossible places, inside sealed jars, atop the chandelier, in the cold chimney throat. Every cleansing, every consecration, every repair only deepened the wound, binding the spirits more tightly, making them heavier, angrier, more desperate. They were not attackers. They were mourners defending their right to grieve, to remember, to cling to the phantom walls that were all they had left. And with each passing day, the veil between the living and the dead inside Hartwick Manor grew thinner. The cost of coexistence grew higher. Until one night, Lily slipped into the nursery, barefoot and silent. She sat cross-legged on the floor and whispered into the shadows, "I'm sorry you're hurting. You can stay. I'm not afraid." Something shifted. The icy air warmed. Shadows stirred, and on the floor bloomed a soft golden glow, neither firelight nor sunlight, but something gentler, timeless. Within it, forms appeared. Eleanor, Anna, Nicholas. They were smiling, at peace. "Thank you," Eleanor whispered, her voice now faint as a sigh. "But it's time for us to go." She looked to her children, took their hands, and together they stepped into the light. It embraced them, dissolved them, and was gone. The room remained empty but warm. By morning, the Carters found the house transformed. The air was crisp, the light gentle, welcoming. They chose to stay. They restored the mansion, but every night they lit a candle beneath the old oak tree in memory of the family who had loved this place too fiercely to leave. And on the stillest evenings, if one listened with all one's heart, laughter could be heard. Bright, carefree children's laughter drifting from the garden where the old swings stood motionless in the dusk.